On March 25th, 2025, this is a meeting of the Finance Committee of the Town of Halifax. A couple of items to start off with. This meeting is being recorded by Area 58 for later viewing. All members are present in person at Town Hall. Cheryl Burke, Mike Bennett, Frank Johnston, Ed Bryan, Bill Smith, Mike Rignetta, and myself. Two things on the agenda. First thing on the agenda item is the acceptance of minutes from 3/10 of 25. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes that were distributed last week? Yes. Anybody have any adds, changes, or deletions?
No.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Next item we have on our budget is the next item on the agenda, we have the FY26 budget for a review and a vote. Cody has brought in some new budgets for us to have a look at, and also for an override budget. So I'll turn it over to Cody right now if you would like to just kind of brief everybody on where we're at.
Yeah, so not really any significant changes compared to what you've been seeing for the past couple of weeks. A couple of small adjustments in the elected treasurer collector and elected town clerk salary. I had forgotten, I think I mentioned the treasurer collector gets a $1,000 stipend for being certified, so I needed to make sure that was added in. And then, like I had said, the idea was putting it on the next closest step within the range there. And then the town clerk, I think we had mentioned the position was kind of misgraded in the past, so the idea was just getting it on that step one of the grade. Those are the two changes in the balanced budget. The other change is under the library wages. We added a little bit of funding back into that because my previous recommendation would have brought us below the 3-year average plus 2.5%, which would have put us at risk of being certified and potentially some grant funding. So it made sense for us to add a little less than $10,000 back in, and then we're eligible for 20,000+ in grants. So it really makes up for itself. So those are pretty much the changes here. It's as perfect of a budget as I think we're going to get. We spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah, Cody, thank you for all your work on this.
Lindsay's been very helpful too.
This was a task in itself. Yeah, both of you. I can't even imagine how many hours you put into this.
Any questions on any of the particulars? Again, like I said, really 3 small changes in the balanced budget. And then the differentiation under on the override budget is just taking into account that funding to make sure we reach that 3-year average plus 2.5%.
Okay. So, I mean, my question's a pretty broad one, so it's kind of open for discussion. Now, everybody who is on the committee was at the meeting last year when things got kind of upended with the residents not wanting to follow the budget that we had set out. We had to make changes during the meeting, right? Again, fine, not a big deal. Is that something, I think that's something we should talk about now, and something I'm putting out to the committee itself is, so we don't get kind of caught by the short hairs, by the residents wanting to change things from a monetary perspective. Do we need to prepare a third budget that has some other dollars moved around? So, as an example, if they don't want to, spend money in the capital plan the way we have it laid out, and they want to move it somewhere else, do we need to prepare a budget for that, or is that something that would have to be addressed at a later date, which causes an issue of when that budget would actually get approved, right?
Yes. So a couple points on that. The idea, so capital is funded with free cash. Capital Planning Committee makes a recommendation. These are the items. It was in the presentation that I had sent out there. Ultimately, foregoing that would be a Board of Selectmen policy decision if they wanted to vary make any variances from that. Finance committee can certainly make a recommendation, hey,
Right.
we recommend that you don't fund X and you utilize it for X. Again, broken record, but I'm never going to recommend using one-time funds for reoccurring expenses. If that were something that were to change, you wouldn't necessarily change the budget. It would just be our revenues. So on the backside, you all have access to it. You can see it in those spreadsheets. We have a revenues page where it shows all our forecasted revenues. That would just go into there basically as an additional revenue source. If under the override budget, it would obviously just reduce the deficit. So we have an 810,000, give or take, deficit. If you appropriated $300,000 from free cash, it obviously reduces that deficit. So you either make cuts or you go for an override for that amount.
Right.
If someone were to make a motion to appropriate funding from free cash to somewhere in the budget, that would be on whoever was making the motion. They'd have to identify where in the budget they want that funding to go.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that we're prepared when we get to the meeting, because I think it's going to be, because you see it all over the local news. Duxbury, Norwell, everybody's got a deficit they're dealing with, and everybody's addressing it however they can best address it, right? So I just want to make sure that we're prepared as a finance committee to either support or not support that. That's the first thing for the committee to kind of discuss and talk about, because when if that question comes up, and I feel pretty confident it will, we need to say whether we support that or not, right? And not just kind of, stand there with our hat in our hand saying, I don't know.
These are your recommended budgets.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's what I'm recommending to
Right.
you, but at the end of the day, it's something that you are voting on to recommend.
Yep.
I can tell you we're going to try to be as prepared as we can be for town meeting. We're going to try to, like we talked about, have some budget forums in April.
Right.
Put together a little bit of a more when you saw the presentation for tonight, make that a little bit more robust and give that at town meeting. Obviously, once there is a definitive plan in place. And be prepared for amendments to some extent, but obviously it all depends on what the nature is. We'll try to be prepared as possible. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Right.
As far as things like wages, we're talking, it's not a ton of employees. It's about 15 employees now that are non-union. That, if town meeting, again, if you made a recommendation tonight for a 2% COLA, and that were to change, I can certainly have that information ready. But to present it, I don't know if that's the best option either, because, well, I guess you want to stand behind the budget you're presenting, the information you're presenting, and not necessarily say, well, you can pick this or that, because naturally people are going to say, well, we'll pick the lesser option, right?
Right.
And when it comes to the wages, my concern is, if wages don't go through again this year, now you're 2 years without any sort of cost of living adjustment. It's one thing to go one, people are getting their step increases, but, two, just like the town's facing tough economic times in the community, so are our employees, right? Our employees are no different than that. So, and we're not talking 5% COLA this year, right? We're talking 2% COLA as last year's done with. So if we get to that at this town meeting, or you guys, when you discuss it tonight, I just would strongly urge, take that into consideration. It's funding, and I get that, but relatively speaking, in a $30 million budget, we're talking about $17,000, $18,000. Adequately compensate our employees.
Yeah, and I think with the budget the way it is and the amount of cutting that needed to happen to get the budget where it is right now, who knows what's going to be asked of those employees coming into the next year.
Right.
So I think that needs to play into our decision as well, because they did not get the increase last year. And we're looking at a deficit that's a lot more than we were last year, is my point, right? So we just have to be ready for that.
Yeah, part of that we need to discuss too, Cody, is, you know, if wages don't go through again this year, well, then now you're 2 years without any sort of cost of living adjustment. You know, it's one thing to go one, you know, people are getting their step increases, but, you know, 2, you're just like the town's facing tough economic times in the community, so are our employees, right? So about the new union that's taken place with a lot of those workers that didn't get the wages last year, and how that's going to affect us going forward with collective bargaining now, and how many people are left that are strictly just going to be COLAs on an annualized basis.
Yeah. So my goal really is, you guys, along with the selectmen and the department heads, I rely on all of you, or you're the eyes and ears of the community. So that's why as things come up, if you think there's, things, hey, you missed this, or, did you think about this? Let us know, and we'll try to be prepared for town meeting. That's also the goal of those budget workshops. Once we get through tonight, get those scheduled and get feedback. The goal is to hopefully answer questions during those meetings, but at the very least, if we don't, we can say, okay, we'll circle back to you, and it lets us get a little bit more prepared, because there's always things that come up that just didn't think of. I mean, it just it happens. So beyond the budget forums, the presentation at town meeting, I don't know how much more prepared we can be. I think we were prepared last year, but we spent a lot of time this year in tightening things up.
And maybe the PowerPoint presentation you're going to have tonight, or as it gets refined as we go along, after you have a public forum, maybe we can get that loaded onto the town website so people have access to it that way as well, so they can spend time looking at those numbers themselves.
As soon as we have some sort of approvals tonight, we're going to create a FY26 budget page on the website. Presentations will be there. If there's multiple versions of the budgets, that information will be there. When we do the first public forum, we want to call it, we're going to have Area 58 record it. We'll post that there. Really want to try to get the information out there.
Yeah, it's similar to what Hanson just set up.
Yep.
Something very similar to that. Okay.
Okay. So Cody, are we voting on both budgets? Is that what we're doing?
It's up to you guys, right? So basically, if you had a chance to look at my presentation, you kind of, the town, you and the Board of Selectmen, in my professional opinion, I think you have really three options, right? So we're presented with a deficit of approximately 810,000. The actual number is like 806 and change, but for conversation's sake, we'll call it 810. You have the balanced budget in front of you, which would be all balanced, right? No override. That eliminates the deficit of 810,000. Cuts I had mentioned before in general government, and then some additional cuts at the elementary school. So your option is go with that, forego an override this year, make cuts. I can tell you now there's going to be an override next year. We're going to have an override next year. Whether you approve, whether you recommend one this year or not, given Silver Lake's anticipated assessment next year, I anticipate very well we'll have an override next year.
So the 810, what would that be as a taxpayer? 200 and...
286.30.
My laptop.
On a $500,000 valuation.
Yeah, it was like 550 on a million.
Yeah, that's the average.
So if you lessen that, well, hypothetically, 300,000 off. Well, it's
When I grab my laptop, I can let you know. Sorry.
Yeah, it's on that spreadsheet that, or the presentation tonight, that breakout of that, based on the assessed values.
Okay.
So option one, no override. You approve a balanced budget with cuts. Option two, you present basically two budgets. One is the balanced budget. That would be your typical Article 4 at town meeting. And then you have a supplemental budget, basically. That would be the amount of the override. Both articles have to pass. Then it goes to the ballot to fund that supplemental budget. Passes the ballot, we're good. We have a full budget with a supplemental budget. If it doesn't pass the ballot, we refrain back to Article 4. So the override is your second option. And again, we will need one next year, so I want to make that very clear. This is not a one-year approach. This basically gets the town side of things through this year. Silver Lake used their one-time funds. We still saw quite a big increase in the assessment, but next year I anticipate our Silver Lake assessment to be at least $800,000 increase is probably fair, right? Because you can anticipate they're probably going to come in with around a 5% increase in their budget, which is approximately $400,000 for us.
Yeah.
And then they used $1.2 million in their one-time funds,
Yeah.
which were about 33% of the budget. So that's $400,000 there. So it's safe to assume, those are just very high-level figures, but it's a pretty safe assumption there. And then option 3, I don't recommend it. I'm never going to recommend that you use one-time funds for recurring expenses. You could do, you could use some sort of free cash to help get you through this year, knowing that you're going to need the override next year. A caveat with, if you were to do that, and this is just based on my conversations with other town managers, town administrators, it's not wise to also do an override this year, even if it's in a lesser amount. Because typically, communities that do multiple overrides consecutively don't have high success rates, even if the amounts are lower. So if you were to use one-time funds this year, my recommendation would be a combination of one-time funds with cuts, forego an override this year, knowing that next year you are going to have an override, and it hopefully gives you a little bit more time to prepare if we can get some more information from the schools, but also it makes it one operational override. And also Kingston and Plimpton are likely to need an override next year as well.
So what's the, which is a, it's, yeah, I get it.
Well said.
Yeah. So what is the, that comment made me lose my train of thought. Oh, what is the, what's the estimate of, I know you gave us the estimate on education next year, but if we're thinking now that an override is a requirement for next year, what is that number ballpark? Is it around the same amount? Is it less?
This is
it
the
more?
challenge. I can put a very good, we have projections for general government side of things.
Yes.
And I have a pretty good idea of things, right? Our bar,
Less, more, or the same? I don't even want a number. I just,
of 810?
yeah.
More.
Okay. More.
I would say it's probably fair to say, it's probably fair to say $1 million plus.
Yeah.
Because if you just, again, I'm giving
Yeah,
very high
factory, so
numbers
yeah.
here, but if you take, I anticipate our revenue growth to be very similar next year as to, or fiscal 27 as fiscal 26. So call it maybe $800,000 in new revenue. We just said we anticipate Silver Lake increase being $800,000. So without any increases to Halifax Elementary School or our general government, our new revenues are hypothetically in our projections wiped out. So any increases to Halifax Elementary, which you heard their contractual obligations, you can expect probably them to at least request 5%. Not to say we can approve 5%. You can expect them to request maybe 5%, and then you can expect somewhere probably at least 3% for the general government side of things. So you're looking at likely the $1 million, somewhere in that 1 to 1.5.
At least.
Again, high level, don't hold me to it, but it's the best figure I can give you at this point.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Anything else for me quickly? I have to jump into a selectman meeting.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Cody. Great work.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
What are we voting on tonight here? The school budget?
Now we're voting on, I guess,
Both.
well, either one, the 810
Or
or,
actually both, don't we?
well,
We're deciding what budget to present to the Board of
right.
Selectmen.
So here's my final thought on this, to be honest. It's my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion. I agree with Cody, we're gonna have to fight an override next year. I would rather take 810 and fund the budget out of free cash this year and fight the override next year, instead of trying to fight 2 overrides.
So I agree with that, except I don't know if I like the whole 810 amount.
Okay. Well, again, the capital, there's two big numbers in the capital planning, right?
Right.
Ambulance, roads.
Yeah.
That's $800,000.
That's $800,000.
Is the road?
Is the roads is 3.
And the ambulance is 5.
The ambulance, 3 for
Can he survive without an ambulance?
Well, that's the question, right? So the ambulance that we're talking about is a 2019 ambulance. It's got, I don't know, like 60-some thousand miles on it. The maintenance looks like it was like $6,000, which to me is negligible.
Right, especially on a vehicle of that
Right.
nature. Right. $6,000 is, what's that? $600 a month,
Right.
$500 a month?
Right.
And you can believe it's going to take him a good year to get the vehicle.
At least 3 is what he said.
From order
Yeah.
to delivery.
It's at least.
Well, yeah, you would know, right? You would know
That's
that.
why they're wanting to take it now,
Yeah.
But I feel that between the roads and the ambulance is $800,000. And do we need to do 2 police cruises this year?
Well, that's, that's the rotation that they're on, right?
Right, but a lot of things are
Which
on
is why he's
rotation.
asking for 2. I'm not saying that
Right.
he should have to. That's the rotation that he's on.
Right, that's what he's been asking for.
It's going to be, you
Yeah.
got to think of the cost though, when they start breaking down, because
Yeah.
you got to think these vehicles are 24/7, 365, and the cost can be exuberant if they let
Right.
go into the year. It's going
I mean, the longer you put it off, the more it's going to cost to fix it.
Right, I understand,
That's
but
just
if we have to skip a year to clean things up for this year, so we go into next year knowing dang well that Silver Lake's gonna come in heavy next year, that we do the override for next year and not this year.
Save the fight.
Is that right? Is
You
that-
can't do 2 overrides.
Can't do 2 in a row.
Do 2 in a row.
2 aren't gonna fly.
2 aren't gonna.
So,
One's gonna be harder.
Jim,
Yeah.
what is our free cash number?
1.3.
1.3.
And they use all of it up for the capital improvement?
Well, yeah, because that's been the course of business that they've worked, right? So there's a cyclical inspection for the assessor's office that we need to finish. That's $94,000. Highway, stormwater management, $80,000. Building maintenance, the funding we have to add money to get the library window thing project done. So that's another $20,000. The fire department, they want an ambulance, right? So that's $500.
They're looking for
50 for gear,
Yeah.
70 for rescue tools, annual road maintenance, $300,000, which I thought was in the budget, but I don't know how it got to capital planning.
That would,
Well, he gets his other money
Well, he
from,
gets Chapter 90 money
right,
from the state.
right, which is like, I don't know, 300,000.
Yeah,
or something.
360 or something
Yeah.
like that, yeah. Blacksmith shop, $35,000. The 2 water department ones are going to come out of their retained earnings, so that doesn't apply.
Right.
2 police vehicles, 120. Firearm replacement, 15. And then water treatment plant, that's 500,000. But again, that's retained earnings.
That's out of retained earnings,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Okay? So that's a capital plan.
What's the 35,000 for the blacksmith?
you know,
The repairs to the shop, the historical
he took it
repairs
out
to
of
the
here.
shop,
and went
the
with it.
blacksmith.
Does that have to be done this year?
Well, they wanted it last year, we didn't do it last year, so now they're back.
Yeah, it's been that way for 2 or 3 years now.
So Jim, I agree with your approach. I think that it's unrealistic to expect to be able to go in and ask for an override 2 years in a row, specifically at the amounts that we're talking. So again, the 810 is a tough number for me to get behind. My head is at $500,000 out of free cash and then $300,000 in additional cuts somewhere. So it's more than halfway funded, because I do think that there is potential for there to be room. We heard Elementary last week, I think, tell us that they were putting a freeze on $200,000 of their special ed money. If I'm hearing their previous meetings, there's over $300,000 that's there right now, so there might be some potential for additional savings there.
Yeah, I think it was 200 and 200. 200,000 this year and 200,000 next year.
Right, but the number that's there this year is greater than 200,000, is my point. So there might be an option there. I don't know, I just think $500,000 in free cash for the whole year is not a lot for us to be able to get done what we need to get done as a town. That's my concern. But I agree 100% that if the committee here doesn't agree that that's the approach we take, I'm with everyone on the fact that we can't go 2 years in a row with an override.
I'd rather see the whole 800 taken out.
Yeah.
Well, that's my opinion too.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be able to make another $300,000 in cuts.
No.
I just don't think it's there.
The school's already cutting.
It's too much.
Getting rid of teachers. The town will be in an uproar if the school has to make more cuts of any kind.
I just worry what 1.7 looks like next year.
Yeah.
Right? Because those cuts are a lot more significant than 300,000. That's my concern, is if that, because I know we're talking about this year, but we need to talk about this year with next year in mind as well, given the circumstances. And if we're worried about the school having to cut with the number we're at, what position will we be in next year when we're looking at over $1 million? That's the only reason why I am concerned about that all-in with free cash this year.
Right. No, that's a fair point. So if using the current property values, a $1 million override in Halifax is $352.76 additional. So add to that, obviously, if it goes over that.
At $500,000, correct? I mean, that's $1 million?
That's $1 million.
So you're figuring
It's $1 million override
$1 million override
based on what property valuation?
is today.
500,000.
500,000.
Yeah.
Right, that's it.
So it's probably closer to $1,000 per, given the valuations where they are right now, for the majority.
Well, yeah, I guess.
It's going to go
Yeah.
up a little bit.
So that's what we're going to be asking for next year.
Right. Probably a little more.
Right.
Probably close to 450, I would think, to cover everything.
But that a year from now is much more manageable than going back to that well
Well, you
twice.
can't, yeah, you're not going to be able to go back to the well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the residents are going to have a hard time swallowing some of those capital expenses. And it's not
right,
going to
so-
be an override person.
Which one of these do we want to approve, guys? That's where we're at.
Well, I think we have
Balanced
to go with
budget?
the balanced budget. I don't think we have a choice.
Well, we can approve both. Right?
Yeah, and then it's up to the selectmen.
Decide
It's up to the selectmen
how they want
to
to
decide
fund
if
it.
they want to fund it override or do that on the ballot.
Recommendation from us to fund it out of capital expenditures of $800,000.
Right.
One time.
One-time funds.
Yes, for this year.
Okay. So,
And then the selectmen will decide if they want to present,
Then that's up to them.
That's up to them.
At that point.
and then the town will have to vote on whether the override would pass if they decide
That's
to
right.
pass by the override. So
And then the override
It's gonna be a tough
goes,
sell to
if the override passes, it goes to the Saturday election.
Right.
Town election, which is where it should, that decision should be made there.
the residents
Agreed,
need to make that
agreed.
decision.
That's why I don't think we need to decide on one of these. I think that the town, Cody, Lindsay, we've done a good job putting these together.
Should decide to put it on the ballot
That's fine.
Saturday.
Right, but it needs to be residents.
Okay.
That's right.
So the motion is then what? To vote on, to approve both?
I think a motion to approve both budgets, and with 800,000 coming out of
Free cash.
this year's free cash.
Okay.
We can only recommend that, we can't.
No,
We
that's
can
our
only
recommendation.
That's our recommendation.
Right.
But the selectmen have the final say after that.
But then, could we then just recommend the one budget with the override amount instead of both budgets?
No.
No, because we want both budgets on the warrant.
Yeah. Because they're gonna tear it apart.
And then there's,
Well, they have to, so the warrant, the 810 will come first. If they say no to that, then this one follows
right,
this.
okay, all right.
So they're both going to be there.
That makes sense. All right.
And then the 800 is attached to the
Right.
810.
Correct. Yep.
So we're going to vote on both budgets as they stand, and then we're going to suggest that we move 810 from free cash.
From free cash
To fund
to
the
fund
override amount.
the override.
Right.
To get us to a reasonable budget
Yep.
after significant cuts have been made by everybody in town.
Yep.
Is that a motion?
Does that make sense? Makes sense?
I wish you had.
Came out like one, didn't it?
I was well said.
You good with that?
Let's picture it, Tom.
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
So is that the motion? Yeah. Is there a
That's the
second?
motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none? Passes.
Go. Good.
Okay.
All right.
It's now 6 o'clock.
That's a lot.
Wow. Look at that. The timing is everything.
I'm telling you.
Right on time.
I'm telling you. I think, so we did the minutes.
You want to punch through the other?
There's, I don't think, any liaison updates at this point. Correspondence, and as may arise, I haven't gotten any emails outside of anything other than what Cody has sent that we will see here later. Anybody have anything they would like to discuss with the rest of the committee while we're here? No? Okay. Public participation?
Jane?
Gene?
Gene's home.
Okay. Next meeting planning, so I think we have a meeting for next Monday on the calendar already for just the Finance Committee. It'll be a virtual meeting. And we will be meeting with the selectmen here in the next few minutes.
All right. Good job.
That's in the big one.